Hello, friends. This is Doug Schaible, and welcome to the Premature Bible Institute. Just really excited about continuing on with creation because I think it's so foundational and important to understand in order to understand the whole redemptive plan of God. Beginning at the beginning, we talked a little bit in review of the last couple lessons. We talked about how God existed before everything else, and that by nature has implications to it, such as that He is eternal. By nature, anybody who existed before everything else has to be eternal. There can be no other option. Nothing can bring something into existence. In other words, if there's nothing there, that nothing could not bring something into existence. Something had to be there, and that was God. And so He brought this everything into existence that is there. So He's eternal by nature. He's all knowing. He knows everything there is to know and knows the how to do everything that He wants to do. He's all powerful. He has the ability to bring those things into existence. They're by nature, if He's eternal, if He was before everything else, He has to know everything there is that can be known, and everything else has to have got what they could know from Him. He's all powerful. He existed by His own power. He didn't need any of the outside. There was no outside external forces with which He could draw off of. He was by nature His own power, His own knowledge, and He evaluates Himself by Himself. He's omnipresent. I guess we could look at that. We don't know what the present meant at that time, but God was self-existent. That's all there was just God and nothing else. And so we talk about that. We see the character of God even in this beginning of the start of creation. I talked about this before. I think it was, like I say, it was just an analogy. I don't think this is how it looked when God decided to create. But we know, like I said before, just imagine all those angels sitting in heaven, and they're in this giant amphitheater, and the Spirit of God comes up to the stage at the front, turns, gives a slight bow to everybody, turns around, lifts his wand, his baton, and then he starts the process of creating. He goes, "Let there be light," and there was light. And so the light was perfect. It was good. It could transmit enormous amounts of information, and so God made it that way so that we could see what is in this world around us. And then we see in day two, He creates the sky, the firmament, the air, the clouds, all of that, and everything in perfect proportions, and so on. And now we're getting ready to go to start with day three, where He starts the next step in His creative process. Now, can you imagine all the angels sitting there? They're looking, they see this big glob of water, they're looking at all of it, and they're sitting there thinking, wow, God created all of that, and they're just sitting there amazed at it. But then they kind of maybe look to each other and says, I don't understand. What's the point of all the water? And then God starts to form the air. Day one, He creates light. And they're probably just blown away, sitting there thinking, wow, look at that. But what's the point? Now we can see the water, or the light is there. And they're probably not starting to understand yet. Maybe they are, but I don't think they probably are. I wouldn't. I would wonder what's going on. And then the next day He creates the air and the sky and everything. And still, I think they're amazed that He could do that just speaking, and it comes into existence. But once again, the point being, what's the point? Okay, why is all of this being done? Well, now in day three, we're going to start seeing some purpose in it. Not the ultimate purpose, but some purpose in it. And He's given them a little more knowledge as time goes on. And maybe, like I said, with each day of creation, when He's doing it, maybe He just allowed it to expand each day a little bit at that. By that I mean, like I think all the light was created perfect and complete on day one, but I think maybe He allowed them to see a little bit as the day formed. And the only reason I would say that is maybe it would be just too much at one moment to see all of that instantly. Maybe He just allowed them to just appreciate that as the day went on. And then in day two, the sky and the clouds moving back and the water beneath, the water above, and it's just starting to expand. Now, it didn't necessarily happen that way, but that's just a thought. Maybe creative beings couldn't see the what God did in an instant, just like that. Maybe it would have been too much for them to just comprehend. But then again, maybe he made them so that they could. But the idea is that they were blown away, because remember what God said to Job. He says, "Where were you when I formed the foundations of the earth?" And then he says, "And all the sons of God shouted for joy." So there's this big cheering section. Yeah, go for it, And so he creates that. But day 3, he starts doing something a little bit different. And I think this is pretty neat. It isn't so much different as it's unique. Let me put it that way. So day 3 in Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 and 10, it says this: "And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good." So God's revealing something about himself here. He says, let the waters in the heavens be gathered together into one place. So he's taking the water and he's moving it. The ones that are underneath, not the ones that are up above, but all the waters that were underneath, he starts moving them to different places. And he says, and let the dry land appear. Now, it doesn't tell us whether he created, let me put it this way. It doesn't tell us whether the dry land was created separate from the water, or whether it was just as the waters moved back, the dry land that was already there appeared. We don't know that for sure. But we do know that God caused both of those things to appear that day. The water was there, but then the dry land appeared as the waters moved away. And so that was pretty neat. So now we have the air, we have light, we have air in the sky, now we have the waters, and now we have the dry land, and that's appearing. So, and then it says the dry land appeared. It says, and the waters that gathered together he called seas, and the dry land he called earth. And he says, and God saw that it was good. Why would it be good? It's because God is good. God cannot act in a way that is inconsistent with his nature and character. You're going to hear me use that quote over and over and over again. But that is essentially right. God does not act in a way that is inconsistent with his nature and character. So, we look at natural disasters around the earth today, like, Hurricane Harvey or whatever, some tornado that comes through. Was Houston able to stop the waters, the Hurricane Harvey, the waters from coming in? No, they weren't. All they could do is try and sandbag and everything like that, but they couldn't stop the waters. The waters were coming in. That's because man has no ability to control anything that God owns. Did Florida or Puerto Rico, did either one of those stop the hurricanes that came through? No. Do the weather reporters stop the cold from coming this next winter? No, they can't stop that. They can't stop the heat from coming in the summer either. So when we talk about global temperature, global warming, or what is the word they're using, climate change is the norm. That's what climate does. It changes continually, day in, day out. In the morning, it's cooler than the afternoon. The evenings are cooler than the afternoon, and then it gradually cools down. Every day it does that. Every year we have summer, winter, we have spring and fall. And so those things change. They just do. Man is arrogant and thinks he can control all of that. He isn't able to control anything. God in eternity past, because he dwells in eternity, like I said, he knows all this. He designed a system that works for everybody all the time. So in Psalm 95, verse 5, it says this: the sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. So we see God is the one who did this. He caused the seas, he caused the dry land to appear. In other words, when God speaks, it happens. And so that's what happens. God didn't use angels to sandbag the water so that the dry land could appear. No, God just moved him back. He spoke and it happened. Why? Because he's all powerful. That goes back to his character that we learned beforehand. God exists by his own power. So he created the water to begin with. He created the dry land to begin with. Therefore, he controls both of them. So I always remember back years ago, there was a little cartoon I can't remember if I saw it in a newspaper or in a magazine or something like that, and I always thought it was really funny. And it shows this little baby in a bassinet, and it's just sitting there getting ready to take a little bath. The mother's getting ready to bathe the little child, and the little child's just laying there in the bassinet and dry, just on the dry bassinet, but on both sides of the bassinet, the water is standing up on both sides of the baby, and he's laying in the dry end. And the mother's just looking at the child and says, Moses, he says, cut that out. And so the mother is sitting there saying, Moses, don't do that. And it's just a joke on the idea that when Moses crossed the Red Sea that the waters parted. Now, obviously, Moses couldn't make the waters part. God did that in response to what God, and then Moses just did what God told him to do. So, but God doesn't have to ask anybody anything. He can just do it because he owns it. God didn't debate or dialogue with the water. He didn't say, gee, should you guys move back? Do you think it's a good idea? I mean, it's been like this now for 2 whole days. I don't know if I should do this on day 3. Do you think he said that? No, he didn't do it. He didn't debate on what it should do. He just spoke and it happened. And that's the thing about what God can do. So now the water starts moving back, but on the latter part of that day, it says God spoke, and what does it say? The dry land appeared. So as the waters moved back, the dry land appeared. Now, we don't know where all the water went. Some believe it went underground, that there are big giant caverns down underneath the ocean and underneath the land. And I tend to agree with that. I'm not dogmatic about it, but that's where I think, and we'll find out why. You'll find out later on why I think that's what happened. So God caused the water to go underground, but some of it he left up above, and that's what we call seas and oceans and rivers and lakes and so on. So that's what God did there on day number 3, but that's not all. And this is what's really neat. When we see now the angels, I'm sure, are looking at this and say, wow, God speaks and the water moves back, the dry land appears. But they're still asking, I wonder what's the point of all this? Maybe they're not quite getting it yet, but they will start getting it at the end of this day, and it's getting ready to happen. So let's read Genesis 1, verses 11 through 13. And God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 3rd day. So what happens here, now God starts to create the vegetation. All the vegetation, trees, grass, plants, fruit, vegetables, whatever. All the vegetation is now being created. And God does this at the end of day 3. And like I said, think of the angels as they're watching all of this, and they're seeing, okay, day 1, God creates light. Day 2, creates a firmament. Day 3, moves the water. Dry land appears. And maybe they didn't understand what was going on. But just because you don't see a reason for something being created does not mean that there isn't a reason for it being created. See, God had a plan, and he was doing things in a way that you see that the things done before were necessary in order for the things that would happen later. And so water, just think about this, water could exist by itself. No problem. Water could do that. Light can exist by itself. Air can exist by itself. But you know what? Dry land, and even dry land, can exist by itself. But God now reveals himself in a more concrete way. And the purpose for the foundation of what has been done before. Yes, all of those things could have been done in and of themselves, but the plants couldn't. The plants could not exist by themselves. I was at camp, Kansas Bible Camp here in Kansas years ago, and I remember I was teaching about the days of creation. And I got up to day 3, and I talked about all of this. I told all the things that went on. And on day 3, when I get to God creating the dry land and all the vegetation appearing, this kid came. I always used to love this. I would always tell the kids, I says, kids, I says, God could have created everything just one color if he'd have wanted to. Purple sky, purple sun, purple moon, purple stars, purple fish, purple people, purple plants, purple animals, purple dogs, cats, all these, everything purple if he'd have wanted to. I says, but did he do that? And all the kids says, no. And I says, you know what? He could have created just one kind of food, too, if he'd have wanted to. I says, spinach. And they all go, oh, no, no. Oh, this is not just any old spinach. I said, purple spinach. So I says, for breakfast, you'd have purple spinach flakes for breakfast, purple spinach chip cookies for break, purple spinach burgers for lunch, purple spinach soup for supper. I says, wouldn't that be good? And of course, they all grossed out. Nah, that wouldn't be good. I says, did God do that? They said, no. I says, why do you think he created all these different colors and so on? And somebody said, because God's not a boring God. I thought, man, that is good. He's not a boring God. And afterwards, this kid came up to me after class and he says, he says, I never saw all that before. I said, what's that? He says, I always knew plants needed water and air and light and dirt to exist. But I didn't see how God created all of those first before he created the plants. I said, hey, that's really good. I says, I didn't even think of that. I said, well, what does that tell you about God? He says, God's an orderly God, isn't he? And that's a 10-year-old kid telling me this. And I was just blown away. I said, the kid got it. God is an orderly God. God does things decently and in order. He takes his time. Whatever he's preparing for something later on also. So the angels are now sitting there looking at this, I'm sure, and saying, oh, so that's why the light, the air, the dry land, the water, and all that, because these plants needed those to exist. It needed all of those things to exist. So I just thought it was just interesting. He didn't make only one kind of food, and he didn't make everything just one color. He created everything. So, all these Aggie universities that we have, well, I'll talk about that at another time. But they study all of this, don't they? Agricultural colleges, farmers and horticulturists and Aggie colleges, they all plan around one thing, that vegetation will produce vegetation just like itself. I mean, how many agricultural colleges do you think there are that spend their time, like up in Nebraska or Kansas or Iowa, where they grow a lot of corn? How many of them are out there trying to turn that into apples or tomatoes or cucumbers? I says, they're not. They're just trying to grow the best corn they can because they know corn will produce corn. They know that if they plant corn, it isn't going to be apple trees that will be coming up when its own season. It's not going to be cucumbers or watermelons. It'll be corn. Or if they plant apples, that's what they expect to come up. It's not going to produce hanging bunches of bananas or anything else. Everything will produce everything according to its kind, and that's exactly what it said up there, isn't it? It says, the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Why would it be good? Because God is good. God does things decently and in order. And there was evening and there was morning, it says the third day. So God's not a boring God. And like I said, there's reason for creating these things will be revealed here before too long. Now, it just amazes me. One time I was driving down a road and I was on my way to Dallas, and I saw a whole field of Indian paintbrush and blue bonnets out in the field. And I was out there laying in the grass, taking pictures, really trying to get some real good close-ups of them. And all of a sudden, I hear this car stopping on the side of the road, and the guy yelling out to the field, "Are you all right? Are you all right?" And I think he thought I got hurt or I was sick or something like that. And I yelled, I said, I'm just taking pictures. I was just amazed. And those things never get boring. They just don't. Every time I look at those flowers and different kinds of vegetation out there, it just never gets boring. And so, you think of what God was doing here. He didn't create everything just one color. He gave us the colors of, roses. How many different kinds of roses are there? Or hibiscus, or tulips, or grass, or leaves. All the different kinds that are out there just show us that God's not a boring God. All the different kinds of sounds that are out there, all the different types of wind as it goes through creaking trees, as a bird pushes against a tree and the tree creaks and stuff like that, and you hear that. Or none of you, or probably a lot of you, have never stood in a field of wheat and heard the wind rustling over the wheat and hearing it just sit there blow, and it just has a specific sound to it. Or as the wind goes through mountains and you hear the whistling of the wind as it goes through mountains and everything. It's just amazing. Or the different types of flavors that there are. There's of the greens and carrots and apples and oranges and peaches. Oh man, a Georgia peach or a Wisconsin apple or whatever. And I don't mean to pick on a particular state. A lot of different places they grow, or bananas, or just all the different things, or pears or watermelon. Those are things that we like. Or the different types of textures there are as you feel. I mean, cotton feels different than a cactus does, or different types of trees and leaves and flowers and just different types of textures of all kinds of things. And how about the different types of aromas that are out there? I mean, you smell a rose, you smell a hibiscus, you smell lilacs, or all different kinds of smells of, ooh, a good aroma of a steak or whatever. Just all the different kinds of aromas that are out there. And God made all of that. He gave all those types of aromas. Why? Because God's not a boring God. God is a God of order and symmetry. He does things. He doesn't have all the plants or the vegetation all on one side of a plant. He has it on both, and it just grows and it does things in a way that just shows his nature and character. That being said, I do want to bring up a particular statistic I think is a pretty interesting thing. Sometimes people will say, well, it just happened. It was just the evolutionary process. I want to share a statistic with you. This has nothing to do with faith per se. It's simply a mathematical possibility, and it's a good one. What do you think the mathematical possibilities, the statistical possibilities of human enzymes to form randomly? Just human enzymes, nothing else in the universe. The rotation of planets around stars, the rotation of solar systems around anything else. What are the chances of asteroids hitting us, a big asteroid or whatever? But just take human enzymes. That's it. Nothing else in the universe. It is a known number. It is 1 times 10 to the 40,000th power. So you have one chance in 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, 40,000 times. That's the amount, those are the possibilities of human enzymes forming randomly. Now, we don't really have a way of figuring out that how big that number is. We just can't wrap our minds around it. But let me give you an example just to show you how big that number is. The oldest anybody has ever said that the universe was 32.8 billion years old. So let's just take 32.8 billion years as a number. And let's just say you wanted to figure out, have a computer that could figure out the possibilities. In other words, try all the different combinations in that 1 in 10 to the 40,000th power, but they have 32.8 billion years, 8 billion years to figure it out. If this supercomputer could try 1,000 trillion combinations every second for 32.8 billion years, you know how big that number would have been that they have reached by that point? They would have reached 1 in 10 to the 33rd power. That's all. They would still have 1 in 10 to the 39,967th power to go before they reach all the combinations. So that just gives you an idea of how vast and enormous the possibilities are for anything to form randomly. And that's just human enzymes. That's nothing else. Not plant enzymes, not the rotation of the celestial bodies around us, so on. So that's what it is. Isaiah 55:9 says this, "For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." God is infinite. There is no limit to his numbers. The 1 in 10 to the 40,000th power to him is the same as me trying to go get a six pack of Diet Coke. My chances of picking the right one, it's nothing. It's nothing to him because he's infinite in every way. He's an eternal God. So God is not a random God. This is something we want to conclude with. God is not a random God. He does things decently in order. And he's an orderly God. He's not a boring God. He doesn't do things that just bore us to death. He's an exciting God. He just, like I said, when all the sons of God shouted for joy. And when he lifts that baton and he starts the process of creating, bang, it's done. And whatever he does, it's impressive. And you know what? God is a good God. He really is. God does things in a way that's a blessing to us and a blessing to everything. So God's building. He's not done with his creation yet, and he's building little by little. So we've got light, we got water first of all, then we've got light, we've got air, we've got dry land, and now we've got vegetation. And next week we'll talk some more about the next step in that. So if you enjoy these podcasts, please pass this on to other people. Let them know about it, and have them subscribe to the channel so that they can, when I put out a new one, it gets an update for it. Just tag a friend and have them do that. And like I said, on whether you're on YouTube, you just look for Doug Schaible, Schaible is how I spell my last name. You can look for it on there. And if you want to just listen to the audio podcast, just get on your favorite podcast app and look up Premature Bible Institute, and you'll find it. I want to thank all of you for sitting here and enjoying this. Thank you so much, and you guys keep pressing on. Bye.